Hi, I'm Mike Brauer, and I'm here to talk about yet another compressor. But why? Why do we need another compressor? There's a million out there. And I can tell you I had a whole batch of those, a good portion of those millions. I had 6 racks of compressors, EQs, reverbs, delays, everything. I loved them all. But there was one that stood out. And it stood out because it was truly different than anything else I had that I'd ever heard before. It had this unique ability to bring out a mid-range in almost a vulnerable way. And I use compressors as attitude and tone, and yes, to compress, but mostly the ability to enhance an instrument or a vocal. And one particular compressor stood out, and it's this one. My MHB Green plugin is based on this MHB Green. It's the G7 201 model. Very, very few were made. As a matter of fact, I don't know of any other one in existence except for this one. There are definitely other models, but this one is unique. And as much of my other gears that I've done before, it's heavily modified. There's something about it when I put it across a vocal that I used to just sit there and just go, wow. It would just get a wow out of me. It has so many different layers of harmonic distortion in different amounts, different variations of it, and it immediately brings an instrument forward in presence that, again, I've heard them all, and this one just stood out. Now, this particular one was great, but it was kind of like a one-trick pony because it had that immediate amount of saturation in it as soon as you plugged it in. And so it wasn't always great because sometimes I really wanted it clean. And I just wanted to hear the tubes, I wanted to hear the transformer, but not necessarily the saturation. So it was great on some things, and other things I really had to bring the level input down into it and then make it up on the output to saturate it as little as possible. The little history on this is that it was originally a ship-to-shore compressor, at least I believe that's the story, during the war. And I was communicating a lot with a person from Australia. It was Mick Masters, and always asking him, what do you have? Is there something unique, something unique? And he started telling me about this one. And he goes, he'd never heard anything like it, and there was a guy that owned it that was using it on vocals. And I said, well, do what you can to try and get it for me. And so with patience, he was able to acquire it and send it to me. And it was unbelievable. I think I got this back in around maybe 2000. And I was just in the process of mixing Coldplay, the Parachutes record, which was followed by the X and Y, and eventually the Viva La Vida record. And when I put this across Chris's vocal, it was incredible how it brought out the vulnerability of his voice, the vulnerability of the story. It was a bit mind-blowing because I have so many other compressors. And why did this one just stand out? I don't know. It's a very, very heavy unit, big transformers, lots of tubes, but there was something about it that was truly unique. Yeah, like I said, do we really need another plug-in? That's a compressor. There's a million out there. And I would say absolutely not, except that this one is so different. And you will see that when you try it out. I've put it across everything, at least the plug-in. This I could not. First of all, there's only one of. This is what I love about a plug-in. You can have it in stereo. You can have it in, across every track if you want. With this, I only had one, but I loved it. This is the first plug-in that I've designed in several years to follow up on the Brauer motion that I did. And the reason why I wanted to do a new plug-in was because I love this compressor so much. There is nothing out there like it. And I wanted to be able to use it on more than one track and use it in stereo. And so I thought about who I should go to for this one. And there was at least one company came by to try and get an IR of it. And they said, no, it's too complex. There's too many layers of distortion. It's not possible. Well, I've been friends with Devin and Shane from Kazrog for several years. And we were talking one day and I said, look, I really have a great compressor here. And I'd like to do a whole series with you. What do you think? So we set up a time and Devin came here over a weekend and went through this unit and he was just awestruck. He was like, I've never heard anything like this. And I was like, I know. That's why you're here. And so he proceeded to do all the kind of testing to get the sound right and brought it back to Shane. And over the months, we started to beta test it. We talked about what could it do that's more than it's offering right now, because I really wanted it more versatile. I didn't like the idea that you had to have that saturation right off the bat. So I wanted to be able to control it from basically no saturation to full-on saturation like I'd never heard this unit do. And a few other really, really cool things about it, just to make it more versatile so that even mastering engineers could use it. And that's what they did. It offers this either attitude or a tone or a vulnerability to a sound. And as many of you who have your favorite compressors know, that's what it's about. It's like, what do you do to enhance a particular instrument or a vocal? And there's different compressors that warm them up or give it urgency or make it large or can make a tiny room sound huge. And I've heard them all and I've owned most of them. But this one absolutely was on another level. And that's why I wanted to get it designed and out there to all of you. What's compression anyway? Compression generally within a track, within a song, if you have, let's say, an acoustic guitar, you may lose some of the notes within the context of the music. If it's just acoustic guitar solo, you don't really need any compression on it. And if it's just an acoustic guitar and a vocal, maybe a little bit. But within a track, you may lose the lower notes, the quieter ones. So compression brings what's a little quieter up. And if something gets a little too loud, it kind of brings it down, right? So compression does that. A limiter just says, I don't care what you do, but you can't get any louder. So the quieter notes basically stay quiet. This is a compressor, and you can probably turn it into a limiter. You can turn it into a distortion unit. You can turn it into something that has absolutely no compression going. It's just the sound of the unit. So it's become very, very versatile. There was a point where I really found it was important that everyone have access to this compressor, especially me, because as I travel, I have a travel rig. I can go and mix anywhere in the world. I have my favorite plugins in there, and the one that is absolutely my favorite in the world is here, and it's sitting here. And it needed to be turned into a plugin. And that way I could access it all the time. But who to go to? You know, there's a lot of great companies out there. Well, aside from the fact that I know Devin and I know Shane, it's one thing to know them. It's another thing, well, would they be right for this product? And if you've listened to their other plugins, I own, for example, the Presto. And when they were able to model that, and it sounded exactly like mine, I knew these guys were serious. I knew whatever they were doing, the technology that they were developing to be able to model and emulate a sound. Because it's not just about the great GUI. It's about does it sound like it? Does it feel like it? Because that's what great compressors are about, and even EQs, of course. But what does it feel like, and what does it sound like when you push it way too hard? Because that's where the digitals generally implode and deteriorate. It's like when you really push it hard. But that's what we like. When the unit wakes up is when we push it really hard. And I felt really confident that the guys at Kazrog would just make a great emulation of this. And they have. As a matter of fact, there's going to be more than just this one. It's going to be a whole series that I'm going to be putting out with Kazrog. They're coming up with just really forward-thinking, cutting-edge ideas, cutting-edge technology that they're incorporating into all their plugins. And it's exciting for me. It's a small company, but man, they really have it together. So it's been a pleasure working with them. And that's the other thing too. It's been a pleasure. They're great guys. And more importantly, the way they've been working this plugin, how they developed it, how they added really cool ideas. They're good listeners. I said, hey, can you try this? Can you try that? And we would. And some ideas worked and some ideas we decided we abandoned, right? It's like anything you're developing. It was always just a really good experience. And I'm new to designing. I mean, it's been, several years since the Brauer motion, and it's time now for a new one. And the fact that I haven't been interested in doing anything else speaks volumes on why I would want this one out. And look, demo it and see what you think. Again, who needs another compressor? Well, try this one and you'll probably go, I do. I've used this primarily on vocals, but it sounds amazing on bass because it has this saturation that I'd never heard before. But I've used it on John Mayer, on Chris Martin, on Natalia Lafourcade. I've used it on hundreds of records that I've done. Jim James, My Morning Jacket, James Bay. Well, if you look at any records that I've done since the 2000s, which is, good 24, 25 years, the airway is somewhere on there when it's appropriate. I mean, there are times, again, because of the amount of saturation you'd start with, I didn't use it all the time. But now, with a plugin, you have access to cleanliness where you're just listening to the transformers and the tubes, which is truly amazing for mastering engineers. I've put this across a stereo bus, and the default that I give you when you first put it in alone is just like, what? I don't know how else to describe it, but again, you can demo it for free. So, it's just so different in the way it treats the mid-range, the way it treats the low end, the way it treats the top end, and in a way that's just not harsh. That's warm. The saturation is aggressive when you want it to be, or clean as you want it. So for me, I can't believe that we started with a unit like this that was more like a one-trick pony to where it is now. Because I've sent it to all my friends, before the release. The guys who I master use, Pete Lyman, Joe Laporta. I sent it to those guys. They loved it. And I sent it to all my close friends that I believe, they would have fun with it. Marcella, Greg, Ross Hogarth, Manny, my son, Vance, Reed Shipman, the list goes on. And they all came back and they were just like, what is this? I've never heard anything like it. And it's true. It's true. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been released. I would have stopped in the middle, or I wouldn't even have started, because it's not like I come out with plugins every 6 months or something. This one is really, really special. And I had 6 racks of gear, double-sided. I had 45 compressors and probably 40 EQs or something. I had what you call anchors. This is an anchor, right? It's big, it's heavy. I had like maybe 6 or 7 different ones like this that were all very, very unique. And this one just stood out among everything that I had. And there was a point where I felt that I didn't need all that gear. And plus, all the great companies were emulating my favorite compressors and favorite EQs to the point where it sounded the same and it felt the same. So why need it? And I needed to just bring it down to a point where I could actually travel and not be dependent on all the hardware. I'd already no longer become dependent on a console. My favorite console was an SSL, but they had come up with great SSL channel strips that sounded just like my SSL. So, I never compromised. As I was replacing the hardware with a plugin, with the software, it wasn't a compromise. And, there might be 5 different companies making one particular compressor, one particular EQ, and I would just A/B them all, and the one that reminded me of the real one is the one I stuck with. But nobody had come up with something like this until now, until Kazrog. So it's worthy of you at least listening to it. Trust me on this one, because I know my compressors. So you might ask, well, if this is my secret weapon, why bring it out? Why share it? Well, about 12 years ago, or if not longer, I started Mix with the Masters. And the whole point of that was to bring my friends to these seminars and share their thoughts and their values and their philosophy. It wasn't going to be like a classroom setting where they just talked about technique and stuff like that. It was about what makes this magic, that maybe it isn't as much magic as you can think of, but what is their philosophy? How do they wake up in the morning to come out and mix a hit record and share that knowledge with others? And by doing that, it really improves the level and quality of mixers, even producers. There was a time when this came naturally. Every studio had staff engineers, and they would teach their assistants, who then became engineers, and this would go on generation after generation. And about 20 years ago, that ended. Studios couldn't afford staff engineers, and now there's very few studios left that actually have staff engineers. So what happened to that process of handing down your knowledge to the next generation? It pretty much disappeared. And the point of now having these seminars is to record or share that information with 20 people at a time. Bringing out what is a secret weapon, to me, it's just an instrument. It's just a tool. What are you going to do with it? That's where your creativity comes in. And of course, by sharing this with everyone, everyone benefits. I benefit. You benefit. So it's important to just keep that process going, and everyone benefits from one's knowledge. And if you're creative, then you'll use these tools to an advantage. But I think it becomes pretty obvious when you hear something that sounds good and when it doesn't sound so good, or when it sounds uninteresting. You use it a little bit and you don't want to use it anymore. I think what's special about this particular unit is how versatile and how it makes so many instruments sound good in different ways. It brings out the character of that particular instrument, as opposed to having one sound that it comes out and no matter what you put on it, it's one sound and it changes it. No, this enhances the vocal, enhances the stereo mix. Or, you want to add a lot of distortion and then make it up with the gain. It makes a drum room sound pretty awesome. So it's become that versatile. It's very, very cool.